Hey, it's me, Nalthazar, and welcome to another Magic the Gathering Puzzle Quest video. In today's video, I'm going to be going over a rare from Strixhaven called Retriever Phoenix. So, let's get into it. Now, I came across this card in an odd way of sorts, and then it just completely sparked my desire to try building decks with a whole bunch of cards that I would just never build decks with. And then as a result, I wound up just building and playing a bunch of decks today that I had a great amount of fun with. However, the deck that I had the most fun with was the first one that I built with Retriever Phoenix. So I was hoping originally to build a graveyard themed deck around the new Planeswalker, Jeska Thrice Reborn. And so when I typed in graveyard in my filter, this thing came up. And so I was like, I don't know about this. But then when I read through it again, this sort of like bzz happened in my brain, and I was like, oh, I know exactly something that I want to try with this. And I was like, no, it's not going to work. And then I was like, you know what? I'm going to try it anyways. Why not? And I'm going to record it anyways, just in case. And it was totally worth it. So this card is an 11 mana, 4/4 flying haste with Buried and Learn. So when you cast this card from your hand, learn. And at the end of your turn, if this card is in your graveyard, if you learned this turn, this card gains 11 mana. Now, you'll see that the buried cost of this is 11, or unearth, or whatever it is. So that means that if it gains 11 mana while in your graveyard, it's going to be cast from your graveyard. And since at the end of your turn, if it's in your graveyard and you learned, then it gets 11 mana, it's going to be enough to be able to cast copies of this from the graveyard. So what this made me think is, okay, I wonder if this will work any better than Vengevine did. Because Vengevine is a rather cool card, and it has an ability that makes it work exceptionally well with Otrimi. And it says when you cast a creature, if this card's in your graveyard, it gains 6 mana. It's got the unearth cost, or whatever this is, buried cost of 12, meaning it'll be cast for 12 mana, meaning that if you cast 2 creatures, Vengevine's going to start coming back. And so if you're running a sort of little loop with this thing in Otrimi, then it's just going to, the Otrimi is going to make it so you just keep casting these from your graveyard, and the casts of these are going to throw more Vengevines into the graveyard. So what I decided to do is I decided to build a pretty wacky deck off of it. And so what I thought, okay, you know what? I'm going to try something different for the video too, right? I want to go over like how is it that I went about building the deck around this card, so you guys get a little bit of a window into my deck building. So I wound up going around and messing around with a bunch of different options. That is not the Combust Omni deck that I usually run, by the way. That is, don't run that one. That was for an event. I need to change it back to the original. But anywho, I digress. So the first thing that you need is the Phoenix, right? Because that's the core of the deck. Yeah, we need our Phoenix. So we're going to go ahead. We're going to get our Retriever Phoenix. We're going to put it in the deck. And so what I thought about was, okay, this is clearly something that I want to pair with Gather the Pack. And so what Gather the Pack does is when you cast it, it's only 6 mana. And then if you cast it, you're going to go ahead and take 1 or 2 creatures from your deck, put it into your hand, and then you're going to destroy the next 4 creatures from your library. And since you just get automatically regenerating decks when you run out of options, it means that you can just keep gathering the pack to continue throwing more and more creatures into your graveyard. And so the problem that I've run into with Gather the Pack decks in the past is that Gather the Pack is a singular spell. And so it can be pretty tricky to cast it over and over again. So this is what got me thinking, you know what we need with Gather the Pack is we need some things that are going to copy Gather the Pack. Specifically, Gather the Pack. Because the more things that we have that copy Gather the Pack, the better. And I came across Dual Strike, which is going to copy the first spell in your hand with base mana cost 11 or less and give it full mana. And fortunately for us, Gather the Pack costs 6 mana. So Dual Strike will just automatically cast Gather the Pack. And then there's this new card in Strixhaven called Teach by Example, which is going to copy the first other spell in your hand and give that copy half of its mana, and is only 6 mana. So this was yet another way to go ahead and copy Gather the Pack. And so with this, I had 4 solid cards. I had the Retriever Phoenix, Gather the Pack to throw the Phoenixes in the graveyard, and then Dual Strike and Teach by Example to be able to use Gather the Pack over and over and over again. Which then brought up the, okay, well, now how am I going to make it so that I get these cards enough for this to be consistent and actually decent? And so that's where I got into the, okay, I'm going to need to have some kind of card draw here. I need card draw. And so I was like, all right, what kind of card draw do I want? And it just immediately clicked. I was like, you know what? Blue gem conversion has a heck of a lot of card draw in it because of Castle Vantress. And so if I were to go with a blue gem conversion deck running Seagate Restoration because it draws cards and creates a convert to blue land, and then if I were to also go with Escape to the Wilds because this is going to draw a bunch of cards and then play all my lands, then with this I'm going to be drawing a whole bunch of cards, and then I'm going to be ideally converting a whole bunch of gems to blue. And then in converting all those gems to blue, I'll be able to cast everything that I want to cast. And so I'm just going to go ahead, type in convert blue. I'm going to choose supports. And then I'm going to throw in Castle Vantress because this converts 2 and then is going to have activate gems to draw cards. I'm going to throw in Magosea the Water Veil because this is going to convert 3 to blue, which is the most converting to blue we can get. And Mystic Sanctuary because this can actually convert to blue, and the secondary ability to pull one of the first 4 spells from your graveyard and fetch it is going to potentially get us more Gather the Packs back from the graveyard. Which left me with 1 slot left in the deck. All decks need removal, and the existence of this card enables you to do nonsense like this because you want creature and support removal. And so I just went ahead and threw in Ruinous Ultimatum. Now, if you don't have Ruinous Ultimatum and you have all the other pieces for this deck, you can throw in the Great Aurora, but some kind of big world wipe is absolutely essential for this because you really aren't advancing the board at all. You're just trying to get a pretty wacky combo going by throwing things in the graveyard. So let's go over the essentials real quickly, okay? Before we jump to the gameplay, I want to go over the essentials for this. And I apologize right now in advance. This is a longer video because this is also a slow deck. So not only am I going more into detail about my deck building process, but I'm also going to have to showcase longer gameplay. So, and my finger cracked. Wonderful. Anyways, so the Phoenix, right? So for this to work, you want the Phoenix to be the only creature in your deck. This is important because when you gather the pack, you want to make sure that every gather the pack is going to throw 4 of these Phoenixes into your graveyard. At only a 4/4, this really isn't a massive body, which means every gather the pack should be getting you 16/16 worth of Phoenix. Yes, I know that you're going to get 1 or 2 Phoenixes in your hand, but you really just need 1 Phoenix in your hand. So if you're casting multiple Gather the Packs, just throw the other Retriever Phoenixes out. You don't need them. You're going to be loading up your graveyard just from Gather the Pack. And you only need to cast 1 of these from your hand because since this thing happens to have Learn, you just cast 1 of these and it will count for the card that you need to learn to make it so that you just auto-cast all of the other Phoenixes from your graveyard. Dual Strike and Teach by Example are really good to have. I would argue that these are both pretty essential to making this deck work. You could try to run a Lithoform engine with Pyromancer's Goggles instead, but then you're going to run into the problem of having only 1 creature and 1 spell, because for that to function and be good, you're going to want Gather the Pack really to be your only spell so that you can just chain cast Gather the Pack, or just have Gather the Pack with Teach by Example or Dual Strike or something like that. But it gets tricky if you decide to go that particular route. I went with Seagate Restoration and Escape to the Wilds. Those aren't necessary, but I mean, they definitely make the dream work. So if you've got them, they're very good. And Castle Vantress is the one support that's actually necessary for this because the card draw really is needed. The last thing I'm going to say is that in order to play this deck, just as I was saying, you're going to want to go ahead and throw away the Phoenixes. You're going to notice that I play a lot. And as I play the deck more, I wound up actually disabling the non-copy. The first copy of Gather the Pack I got, I wound up just disabling and keeping in my hand disabled. And I do that a lot because I want there to be a Gather the Pack in my hand for Dual Strike and Teach by Example to be able to copy. So that's really all the thinking that went into this. It was just sort of like a really quick epiphany, and then I had a lot of fun doing it. So I wanted to share it with you guys. And I know I was actually going to go ahead and upload the Jessica Thrice Reborn video for you all today, But then I just had so much fun with this that I just went on a complete tangent. It wound up going over my Dak Faden video. It wound up going over the Jessica Thrice Reborn video. It wound up going over all the other videos that I had that I wanted to share with you guys because I just had so much fun doing this. So let's get into the gameplay of this nonsense at work. Alrighty, so this was, and I kid you not, my very first match that I ever played with this deck. So I threw it in and I was like, all right, I might as well record just in case. And then this happened. So I get the Mystic Sanctuary at the beginning. I wound up prioritizing Escape the Wilds, and I did that because I wanted to get gem conversion down. So it's really important that you have gem conversion. And then I somehow got all the Gather the Packs in the world. So I took the Escape the Wilds back just in case I wanted to use it, but no. Now, with this deck, you really don't ever want to use your third ability because the Phoenix only has 4 power. You will never get anything with your third ability with this deck, with Brokon. And so that means that unless your opponent is stock holding a bunch of removal in their hand, you're going to want to be spamming your first ability as often as you can because your first ability is going to make it so that you have increased mana bonuses and you're going to be drawing more cards. So it's just going to enable you to get to the dream a little bit faster. So I threw away the Seagate Oracle there. That may or may not have been a good idea, but this was, as I said, the very first match that I played with this. So I've got my first Phoenix. That's good. I'm disabling it in my hand. I do not want to cast it. I want to make sure that I get as many other Phoenixes in my graveyard as possible here. And so I'm just checking on my mana bonuses and my loyalty because in drawing Ruinous Ultimatum, that's going to increase my white, red, and black mana bonuses there, and not my blue. But that's okay. I don't need it. And I've got this little 6/6 that keeps pinging me, which I'm not worried about. So you see that I've got the Ruinous Ultimatum in my hand. I'm actually saving that for when Calamity plays something that's actually terrifying. Because I've played against enough Calamity decks to know that it is very likely that Calamity is going to play something terrifying. And so at this stage, I'm just trying to get all the Gather the Packs in my hand off. And then as I'm getting those Gather the Packs off, I'm also trying to accumulate and give mana to a Phoenix. So you'll see I've frozen down one of the Gather the Packs, which is perfect because I draw another Dual Strike out of this. I'm actually going to go ahead and play the Magosi, and then I'm going to play the Gather. I'm going to move I'm going to move my copy up because I know I'm going to be getting 12 mana, and so this is the Dual Strike is going to make it so I guaranteed cast 2 Gather the Packs here, which is going to throw 8 more Phoenixes in the graveyard. And so at this point, I'm starting to get curious. How many of these Phoenixes do I have in my graveyard right now? Because the more that I have in the graveyard, the better, obviously, right? Because the more Phoenixes we have in the graveyard, the more we're going to be getting back. And you'll see I'm still holding on to the Ruinous Ultimatum. I still don't have a reason to cast it yet. Taking 6 damage a turn, I mean, I've got, 16 turns of that thing hitting me before I would die, so I'm very much not worried about that. So Calamity pops her first ability, really not a very big deal. She doesn't get anything out of it. She's got a lot of mana in her hand, though, between the 3 cards. And then you'll see that she's got full mana, and that full mana is staying on that card. So with that full mana staying on that card, that tells me that Calamity has a removal card in her hand, probably a removal of creatures, just because she's not getting rid of my supports. So that tells me that I'm going to need to play a creature. So here I was actually debating just saving up loyalty and using my second ability so that I could play the dragon token and then just have Calamity kill that dragon token and get rid of her removal. But then Calamity goes ahead and kills her own little dude and turns it into that garbage token. So that was really not terrifying. But Xenagos is terrifying, especially since Calamity has haste. So this is where I decided that it was time to go ahead and pop the Ruinous Ultimatum. So the Ruinous Ultimatum is going to get used here. I do not want Calamity to have any of her badness. I do want that 5 match. 5 matches are good. They continue to help make the dream work here. So we're going to get rid of all of Calamity's stuff. Xenagos goes, her first ability goes, the critter goes, and then we draw, yes. We draw Teach by Example and Dual Strike. And so this is exactly why I have that Gather the Pack still in my hand, frozen down. Because it means that I'm going to be able to Dual Strike the thing, and I'm going to be able to Gather the Pack. So I have the Gather the Pack so the order, right? I've got the dual strike first, and then I've got gather the pack, and then I've got teach by example. Because if the teach by example goes over the dual strike, then teach by example is going to copy the dual strike. And the dual strike, if the teach by example is under it, is going to be copying teach by example instead of the gather the pack. So I really wanted to make sure that gather the pack is what got copied here. And so gather the pack is indeed going to get copied here. And so at this point, I'm really just debating, do I want to play the Phoenix? And the answer to that is yes, I do. And I want to play the Phoenix to get rid of Kalemni's removal here. So I'm going to play the Phoenix, and then I hit not now. I decide I don't want to learn because I don't want to cast all the Phoenixes and then just have them get killed. But you can't cast the Phoenix without learning. So I thought that was a pretty good piece of information to learn myself, pun not intended, right there. So at this stage, I know that I'm good. So I'm just going to freeze down one Retriever Phoenix so that I can make all the nonsense shenanigans happen again. I am, however, going to play a Retriever Phoenix here. So let's see how many we get. We get to teach by example. We get to gather the pack and dump even more into our graveyard. I'm going to go ahead and take the Spirit Summoning. Why not? And hit my opponent for 4. Now here's the important thing. Yes, I did learn. Yes, it did give the 11 mana to all of the Phoenixes in my graveyard. However, they only get cast on my turn during effectively a main phase. So my opponent did kill it, but as you can see, I've got 24 Phoenixes in my graveyard ready to go. Technically, I think 23 ready to go because my opponent killed one. But nonetheless, having 23 Phoenixes ready to go here means that I am going to get a ton of confirm prompts to bring Phoenixes onto the battlefield. So here you're going to see that I'm going to take the Illuminate History. I'm going to go ahead and take another one. It's just to make sure that I'm learning. And now I'm just spamming that confirm button. So there's Phoenix 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and you don't need me to count. They're just all coming into play. And so you'll see that just by holding on to Ruinous Ultimatum, I was able to make it so that even if Kalemni popped, I'd be able to get rid of whatever it was that she had popped. By holding that Frozen Gather the Pack that was fully charged in my hand, when I pulled my cards that enabled me to copy, I was able to just keep copying and copying and copying. And as a result, I got a 104 Phoenix from my graveyard for a card that I thought would never be decent. This wound up being actually quite decent and very fun. So I know this isn't enough to kill Kalemni here. Kalemni has a fully charged card in her hand, like a Savage Horrible Monster. That means that she is almost assuredly going to be killing my Phoenix stack here, which is sad news, but, you know, it's going to happen. So we're going to swing for 108 and see what Kalemni's got in the tank. Is it removal like I expect? Yes, it is. But that's really not the biggest deal in the world because I did wind up learning last turn, and I did wind up casting another the Gather the Pack. So I should actually have, I want to say 5 more Phoenixes in the graveyard that are going to be cast here, and then that'll be the end of Kalemni because she's only got 16 health. So I'm going to freeze down one Retriever Phoenix just in case I'm wrong. I do want to have another one in my hand, especially as Kalemni happens to have 2 cards fully charged in hand. That tells me those are probably both removal cards, and we get to bring the Phoenixes back, and it's enough to kill Kalemni. So that's the gameplay with the Phoenix. That's how the deck works. That's how you smack some faces, and it's a lot of fun. I'll even let it go to the training ground screen so you can see. That was seriously match number 1. I'm not kidding. It just sort of went perfectly that way, as it sometimes does when you're recording. Almost never, but sometimes, which was delightful. So come on, loading screen, ba-boom. That was it. So thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.